The laughter had echoed across every star system for 300 years. Earth was the joke that never got old. Every alien species in the Velrani Council found endless entertainment in mocking the small blue planet and its foolish inhabitants. Commander Jake Harris stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched another broadcast from the Velrani homeworld. The aliens had created a comedy show that ran every week. The entire purpose of the show was to make fun of humans. This week, they were laughing at human lifespans. "Look at these creatures," the Velrani host said with a wide grin. "They live for only 80 years. By the time they learn anything useful, they die. What a waste of oxygen." The audience roared with laughter. Thousands of aliens from different species clapped their hands and tentacles and claws together. Making fun of humans was the one thing they all agreed on. Lieutenant Amy Chen turned off the screen. She had seen enough. "I do not understand why we still watch these programs," she said quietly. Harris looked at her with tired eyes. "We watch because we need to remember. Every insult, every joke, every time they called us primitive. We remember all of it." The story of first contact was taught to every human child. 300 years ago, a Velrani ship had landed in Geneva. The whole world had watched with hope and excitement. Humans had dreamed of meeting other intelligent life for centuries. They had prepared speeches about peace and cooperation and the shared journey of discovery. The Velrani ambassador had stepped out of his ship, looked at the gathered world leaders, and laughed. He laughed for a full minute. Then he called his crew to come out and see the primitive creatures who thought they were special. That was the beginning of 3 centuries of humiliation. The Velrani Council governed 12 species across thousands of star systems. They had technology that humans could barely understand. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their medicine could extend life for thousands of years, and they decided that humans were Category 9. The lowest possible ranking, too stupid to matter, too violent to trust, too short-lived to invest in. Admiral Greg Patterson remembered his grandfather telling him stories about the early days. Humanity had begged for access to advanced technology. They needed better medicine. They needed cleaner energy. They needed faster ships to explore beyond their tiny solar system. The Council had refused every request. They said humans were not ready. They said humans were too dangerous. They said humans would probably destroy themselves within a few centuries anyway, so why bother helping them? But they were happy to sell humans entertainment programs. They were happy to let humans buy their old, outdated technology at prices that bankrupted entire nations. They were happy to use Earth as a dumping ground for their garbage and toxic waste. Captain Ben Taylor commanded the patrol ship that guarded the outer edge of the solar system. Every day, he watched Velrani cargo vessels pass through human space without even acknowledging his presence. They acted like humans were invisible, like they did not exist. "Captain," his navigator called out. "Another Velrani cruiser is approaching. They are requesting passage." Taylor looked at the massive alien ship on his screen. It was beautiful in its design, smooth curves and glowing energy fields. It could destroy his entire fleet with a single shot. "Grant them passage," Taylor said. There was nothing else he could do. But deep inside, Taylor knew something the Velrani did not. He knew about the facilities beneath the mountains of Colorado. He knew about the secret shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt. He knew about 300 years of quiet, patient, angry preparation. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Ross served as the chief engineer at the Colorado facility. She had spent her entire career studying alien technology. Every piece of equipment that humans could buy, trade, or steal from the Velrani had been brought here. The aliens thought humans were too stupid to understand their technology. They were wrong. Ross and her team had taken apart Velrani engines and rebuilt them better. They had studied Velrani weapons and made them stronger. They had analyzed Velrani's shields and found their weaknesses. "The new power core is ready for testing," Ross reported to her commander. "It produces 3 times the energy of a standard Velrani reactor." Her commander nodded. "How long until we can install it in the new ships?" 6 months, Ross replied. "Maybe less if we push the teams harder." Above ground, the world looked the same as it always had. Humans went about their daily lives. They watched Velrani entertainment. They complained about alien tourists who treated Earth like a zoo. They accepted their place at the bottom of the galactic order. But underground, the real work continued. Commander Danny Morrison trained the pilots who would fly the new ships. These were not the slow, clumsy vessels that the Velrani expected from humans. These were fast and deadly machines built by a species that had spent centuries preparing for one moment. "Remember," Morrison told his pilots during every training session, "they think we are stupid. They think we are weak. They think we will run away at the first sign of danger. We are going to prove them wrong." The pilots trained in secret. They flew simulations based on captured Velrani tactical data. They learned every weakness, every blind spot, every flaw in alien combat doctrine. Kate Sullivan was one of the best pilots in the program. She had grown up watching the comedy shows that mocked her species. She had seen her parents work themselves to death in factories that produced cheap goods for alien markets. She had felt the burning shame of being born on a planet that the galaxy considered worthless. Now she sat in the cockpit of a ship that could outrun anything the Velrani had ever built. And she smiled. "How does it feel?" Morrison asked her after a training run. Sullivan thought about the question. "It feels like justice," she said. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Commander Harris received a coded message from Admiral Patterson. The message was short and simple. "Phase 3 is complete. The fleet is ready." The craft came from beyond the edge of known space. Nobody had ever heard of them before. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. But everyone quickly learned one thing about them. They were killers. The first attack happened on a Velrani colony world called Nexus Prime. The colony had 5 million inhabitants. Within 6 hours, it had none. The Krath fleet appeared without warning, destroyed every ship in orbit, and burned the entire surface of the planet. Admiral Greg Patterson watched the footage in silence. The Velrani had shared it with every species in the galaxy. They wanted everyone to understand the danger they faced. 17 star systems, Patterson said quietly. "They have destroyed 17 star systems in 6 months." His aide nodded. "The Velrani defense fleet has engaged them 4 times. They have lost every battle. Their losses are approaching 60% of total naval strength." Patterson leaned back in his chair. For 300 years, the Velrani had treated humanity like dirt. They had laughed at human ships and human weapons and human soldiers. Now their mighty empire was burning, and they had nowhere else to turn. "When is the council meeting?" Patterson asked. "Tomorrow," his aide replied. "They have formally requested human attendance for the first time in history." Commander Jake Harris received orders to bring the USS Defiance to Velrani Prime. It was the first time a human warship had ever been invited to the alien homeworld. The irony was not lost on him. Lieutenant Amy Chen stood beside him as their ship entered orbit. Below them, the Velrani capital stretched across an entire continent. Beautiful towers reached toward the sky. Gardens and parks covered every available space. It was a world that had never known war or suffering or fear. Until now. "They are afraid," Chen observed. "You can see it in how they move, how they talk. They have never faced a real threat before." Harris nodded. 300 years of peace made them soft. They forgot what it means to fight for survival. The council chamber was enormous. 12 species sat in a circle around a central platform. Each species had its own section filled with diplomats and military officers and scientists. At the very edge of the chamber, in the smallest and most distant section, sat the human delegation. Admiral Patterson represented Earth. He wore his dress uniform with every medal he had earned during his long career. Beside him sat Ambassador Liz Morgan, a woman who had spent her entire life fighting for human dignity in a galaxy that offered none. The Velrani High Chancellor stood at the center of the platform. He was old even by Velrani standards. With gray skin and tired eyes, his voice trembled as he spoke. The Krath Dominion has rejected all attempts at communication. They do not want peace. They do not want territory. They do not want resources. They want only destruction. He paused and looked around the chamber. Every face showed fear. Every species understood that their way of life was ending. Our combined fleets have failed to stop their advance. Our weapons cannot penetrate their armor. Our ships cannot match their speed. Within 3 months, they will reach the core worlds of the Council. The chamber erupted in noise. Diplomats shouted at each other. Military officers demanded action. Scientists proposed desperate solutions that everyone knew would never work. Patterson sat quietly and watched the chaos. He had waited his entire life for this moment. Every human who had ever been mocked or insulted or dismissed had waited for this moment. The Chancellor raised his hand for silence. It took several minutes before the chamber was quiet enough for him to continue. "There is one species we have not yet asked for help," he said slowly. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. A species we have perhaps treated unfairly over the centuries. He turned to face the human delegation. Every alien eye in the chamber followed his gaze. "Admiral Patterson, Ambassador Morgan, on behalf of the Velrani Council, I formally request military assistance from the planet Earth." The silence that followed was absolute. For 300 years, the Council had refused to acknowledge humans as equals. Now they were begging for help, like frightened children. Morgan stood slowly. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent decades being ignored and insulted by these same aliens. Now they hung on her every word. 300 years ago, she began, your ambassador landed on Earth and laughed at us. He called us primitive. He called us worthless. He said we would never amount to anything. The Chancellor lowered his head in shame. He had no defense against her words. For 300 years, you denied us technology that could have saved millions of human lives. You refused to sell us medicine while our people died of diseases you had cured centuries ago. You treated our planet as a garbage dump for your waste. Morgan paused and looked around the chamber. Every alien refused to meet her eyes. And now you come to us for help. Now, when your mighty fleets are burning and your worlds are dying, you remember that humans exist. The Chancellor spoke carefully. We acknowledge that mistakes were made. We are prepared to offer full reparations, full council membership, access to all restricted technologies, anything you want. Morgan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We will discuss your offer with our government. You will have an answer within 48 hours. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Patterson and the rest of the human delegation followed her. Behind them, they could hear the desperate murmurs of a dozen species who had just realized they might have made a terrible mistake. On the shuttle back to Earth, Patterson finally spoke. What do you think we should do? Morgan looked out the window at the stars. We should help them. Not because they deserve it. Not because they were kind to us, but because it is the right thing to do. Patterson nodded slowly. And because it will show the entire galaxy what humans are capable of. Yes, Morgan agreed. That too. 2 days later, the answer was delivered to the Council. Humanity would fight. The hidden fleet that had been built in secret for generations would finally emerge from the shadows. Captain Ben Taylor received his orders aboard the USS Valor. He gathered his crew and read the message aloud. The Krath fleet numbered 800 ships. They had gathered at the edge of the Nexus 7 system, preparing to destroy the largest shipyard in Velrani space. If the shipyard fell, the Council would lose its ability to build new vessels. The war would be over within months. Commander Danny Morrison flew at the front of the first attack wing. 30 human fighters followed behind him in perfect formation. Their ships were small and fast, painted black to blend with the darkness of space. "All pilots, confirm ready status," Morrison said over the comm. One by one, his pilots responded. Kate Sullivan was among them. She gripped her controls tightly and watched the massive Krath fleet growing larger on her screen. "Remember your training," Morrison continued. "They expect us to form defensive lines like the Velrani. They expect us to run away when they charge. We are going to do something different." The human fleet approached from 3 directions. Admiral Patterson commanded the main force from the USS Defiance. Captain Taylor led the flanking group from the USS Valor. The fighter wings spread out between them like a deadly net. On the bridge of the Defiance, Commander Jake Harris watched the tactical display with cold eyes. The Krath ships were arranged in a standard formation. Heavy cruisers at the front, supply vessels in the middle, command ships at the rear. "They think this will be easy," Harris observed. "They have never lost a battle. They have never faced an enemy who can match them." Lieutenant Amy Chen nodded. "Then let us give them a new experience." Patterson gave the order to attack. The human fleet surged forward with a speed that shocked the Krath commanders. Velrani ships had always approached slowly and carefully. These ugly human vessels came screaming in like angry insects. Morrison and his fighters struck first. They dove through gaps in the Krath formation, firing at weak points that human engineers had identified through months of analysis. The Krath armor was thick and heavy, but it had joints and seams where the plates connected. Sullivan locked onto a Krath destroyer twice the size of her tiny ship. Her targeting computer painted the weak points in red. She fired 3 quick bursts and watched with satisfaction as the destroyer's shield generator exploded. "Target disabled," she reported, "moving to next target." The Krath commanders tried to respond, but human tactics confused them. Instead of staying in formation, the humans attacked and retreated constantly. They struck from unexpected angles. They used asteroids and debris for cover. They refused to play by the rules that every other species followed. Captain Taylor brought the USS Valor around the flank of the Krath fleet. His ship was smaller than a Krath cruiser, but it carried weapons that the aliens had never seen before. "Target the command ship," Taylor ordered. "Full power to forward batteries." The Valor fired. A beam of concentrated energy sliced through space and struck the Krath command vessel. The alien ship shuddered under the impact. Its shields flickered and died. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Ross monitored the power systems with growing excitement. "Direct hit. Their command network is disrupted. They are losing coordination." The battle turned quickly after that. Without their central command, the Krath ships began operating independently. They crashed into each other. They fired on empty space. They panicked. Commander Harris watched a group of Krath heavy cruisers attempt to retreat. They turned their backs to the human fleet, exposing their engines and rear armor. "All batteries, target those cruisers," Harris commanded. "Do not let them escape." The Defiance opened fire. Other human ships joined the attack. Within minutes, the retreating cruisers were reduced to burning wreckage drifting through space. Morrison led his fighters in a final sweep through the remaining Krath vessels. His pilots moved with deadly efficiency, destroying shield generators and weapon systems on every ship they passed. "This is for every joke you never heard," Morrison muttered as he destroyed another enemy vessel. The Krath had no connection to the Velrani who had mocked humanity. But that did not matter. This battle was about proving something. It was about showing the entire galaxy that humans were not to be dismissed. Sullivan counted her kills as the battle wound down. 12 confirmed hits, 7 destroyed vessels, 2 disabled. She was breathing hard and her hands were shaking, but she had never felt more alive. "Sullivan, return to base," Morrison ordered. "You have done enough for today." She pulled her ship around and headed back toward the Defiance. Behind her, the Krath fleet was dying. Ships exploded one after another. Escape pods launched into space, only to be collected by human recovery teams. Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge and surveyed the battlefield. The humans had lost 18 ships out of 200. The Krath had lost 763 out of 800. "Send a message to the Council," Patterson ordered. "Tell them the Nexus 7 shipyard is secure. The Krath threat has been neutralized in this sector." Chen handled the communication. She could hear the disbelief in the Velrani operator's voice when she reported the casualty numbers. The aliens could not believe what had happened. They could not understand how the primitive humans had defeated an enemy that had destroyed their best fleets. On the USS Valor, Captain Taylor gathered his crew for a brief ceremony. They had lost friends in the battle, good people who had given their lives to protect a galaxy that had never shown them kindness. "They died as warriors," Taylor said. "They died proving that humanity is not a joke. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten." Ross wiped tears from her eyes. She had known some of the dead personally. They had worked together in the secret facilities beneath Colorado. They had shared dreams of a day when humans would take their rightful place among the stars. That day had finally arrived. Commander Harris sent a personal message to Admiral Patterson after the battle was over. It contained only 3 words: "Just the beginning." Patterson read the message and smiled. The Krath Dominion still held 17 star systems. There, the news of the battle at Nexus 7 spread across the galaxy like fire. Every species in the Velrani Council heard the impossible story. The primitive humans had defeated the Krath. The joke of the galaxy had won a victory that no one thought possible. Ambassador Liz Morgan walked through the streets of the Velrani capital with a new confidence. For the first time in her career, aliens stepped aside to let her pass. They lowered their eyes when she looked at them. They whispered to each other as she walked by. "They are afraid of us now," her aide observed. Morgan shook her head. "Not afraid. Not yet. They are confused. They do not understand what happened. They thought they knew what humans were capable of. Now they have to reconsider everything." The council called an emergency session to discuss the new situation. This time, the human delegation was given seats at the front of the chamber instead of the distant corners. Admiral Patterson and his staff took their places beside the most powerful species in the galaxy. The Velrani High Chancellor looked older than he had just weeks ago. The stress of the war was destroying him. His hands shook as he raised them for silence. "The Krath threat remains," he began. "They have lost 1 fleet, but they have many more. Our scouts report massive reinforcements gathering beyond the rim. Within months, they will return with even greater force." A Velrani general stepped forward with tactical reports. The holograms showed the remaining Krath territory. 17 star systems still under enemy control. Hundreds of millions of enslaved civilians. An industrial base that was producing new warships every day. "We estimate the Krath will attack again within 90 days, the general said. "Their next fleet will number at least 2,000 vessels, possibly more." The chamber erupted in concerned voices. 2,000 ships was more than the combined fleets of the entire council. Even with the human victory, the math did not work. They were still outnumbered by a massive margin. Patterson stood slowly. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the human admiral who had done what no one thought possible. "The Velrani general is correct about the numbers," Patterson said calmly. "But numbers are not everything. The Krath have quantity. We have quality. They have brute force. We have strategy." He activated his own holographic display. The human fleet appeared alongside detailed tactical plans for the next phase of the war. "We propose a coordinated offensive. Human ships will lead the attack. Council vessels will provide support and defense of key locations. Together, we will push into Krath territory and liberate the occupied systems one by one. The Chancellor studied the plans carefully. This is very aggressive. The Council has never launched an offensive campaign before. We have always defended our territory and waited for enemies to come to us. Patterson nodded. And that strategy has failed against the Krath. They will keep coming until nothing is left. The only way to stop them is to strike at their heart. Ambassador Morgan stepped forward to address the political issues. We understand that this requires trust. The Council must trust human leadership in military matters. In exchange, humanity asks for certain guarantees. She produced a document and handed it to the Chancellor. He read it slowly, his expression growing more troubled with each line. You want full membership in the Council, he said. Voting rights equal to the founding species. Access to all restricted technologies, formal apology for 300 years of discrimination, financial compensation for economic damages, and recognition of Earth as the primary military authority in this sector. Morgan did not blink. Those are our terms. The chamber exploded in argument. Some species demanded that the humans be put in their place. Others pointed out that without human ships they had no chance against the Krath. Old rivalries and new fears mixed together in a storm of conflicting interests. Commander Jake Harris watched from his position behind Patterson. He had spent his entire career being treated as inferior. Now he was watching the most powerful beings in the galaxy argue about whether to give his species the respect it deserved. Lieutenant Amy Chen leaned close to him. Do you think they will accept? Harris considered the question. They have no choice. Their pride tells them to refuse, but their survival instinct will override their pride. They need us more than they want to admit. The debate continued for hours. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves united in their discomfort with human demands. But every time someone proposed rejecting the terms, another voice reminded them of the burning Krath ships at Nexus 7. Finally, the Chancellor called for a vote. Each species registered its decision through a secure system. The results appeared on a screen visible to everyone in the chamber. 10 species voted to accept human terms. 2 voted against. Morgan showed no emotion as she accepted the decision. The Council has made a wise choice. Humanity will honor its commitments. We will defend your worlds as if they were our own. We will fight until the Krath threat is eliminated. She paused and let her words sink in. But we will also remember. We will remember 300 years of being called primitive. We will remember being denied medicine while our children died. We will remember every joke and every insult, not to hold grudges, but to make sure it never happens again. Patterson followed up with military details. Human ships would begin arriving at key strategic positions within the week. Joint training exercises would prepare Council forces to fight alongside human vessels. A unified command structure would ensure coordination during major operations. The war lasted 3 more years. Every month brought new battles and new victories. The human fleet grew stronger while the Krath forces weakened. Star system after star system fell to the combined forces of humanity and the Council. Admiral Patterson watched the final battle from the bridge of the newly commissioned USS Victory. The ship was the largest vessel humans had ever built. It carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. All fleets report ready, Commander Jake Harris announced. The Krath homeworld is directly ahead. Defensive platforms are active, but their fleet is gone. We destroyed the last of their ships at the Battle of Red Nebula. Patterson nodded slowly. 3 years of constant warfare had aged him beyond his years. He had lost friends and colleagues. He had ordered attacks that cost thousands of lives. But he had never wavered. Send the final warning, Patterson ordered. Tell them they have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we will begin orbital bombardment. The message was transmitted on all frequencies. The Krath homeworld received it along with every other planet in the system. For several minutes, there was no response. Then the Krath Supreme Commander appeared on screen. He was a massive creature with thick scales and burning red eyes. His voice was deep and filled with anger. "You cannot win," he growled. "Even if you destroy our world, others will rise to take our place. The galaxy will never be safe from the Krath." Patterson leaned forward in his chair. "You said the same thing when you attacked the Velrani. You believed no one could stop you. You were wrong." The Supreme Commander snarled. "The Velrani are weak. We crushed their fleets like insects. It was only your interference that saved them." "Yes," Patterson agreed. "It was. And now your interference in galactic affairs is over." The hour passed slowly. Lieutenant Amy Chen monitored communications from the planet below. Civilian broadcasts showed panic and confusion. Military channels went silent one by one as Krath commanders realized there was no hope. When the deadline arrived, white flags appeared on every Krath military installation. The Supreme Commander transmitted his formal surrender to the human fleet. Captain Ben Taylor led the ground forces that occupied the Krath capital. He walked through streets that had never seen an enemy soldier. Buildings that had directed campaigns of conquest now housed human administrators. "This is strange," Lieutenant Commander Nicole Ross said as they inspected a former military command center. "They spent centuries conquering other species. Now they are the ones being conquered." Taylor nodded. "Every empire falls eventually. They just did not expect it to happen so quickly." The news of the Krath surrender reached Earth within hours. Celebrations erupted on every continent. People danced in the streets. Fireworks lit up the night sky. For the first time in 300 years, humanity had something to celebrate. Ambassador Liz Morgan addressed the United Nations in a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. She stood at the same podium where world leaders had welcomed the Velrani ambassador 3 centuries ago. "They thought our short lives made us weak," Morgan said. "They were wrong. Our short lives made us urgent. We know we do not have forever, so we make every moment count." She paused and looked at the cameras that carried her words to billions of humans and countless alien species. "They thought our aggression made us primitive. They were wrong. Our aggression made us survivors. When something threatens us, we do not wait for it to go away. We fight back." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "They thought our persistence was stubbornness. They were wrong. Our persistence was preparation. While they laughed at us, we were building. While they mocked us, we were learning. While they ignored us, we were getting ready." The chamber erupted in applause. Humans who had lived their entire lives under the shadow of alien contempt finally felt pride in their species. "The stars no longer laugh at Earth," Morgan concluded. "The stars have learned to listen." Commander Danny Morrison retired from active duty after the war ended. He had led more combat missions than any other human pilot. His body carried scars from a dozen battles, but he had survived, which was more than many of his friends could say. Kate Sullivan took over his position as commander of the fighter wing. She stood before her pilots on the first day of her new command and remembered everything she had experienced. "We proved something in this war," she told them. "We proved that being underestimated is not the same as being weak. We proved that patience and preparation can defeat raw power. We proved that humanity belongs among the stars." The Velrani Council formally dissolved 2 years after the war ended. The old structure was replaced by a new galactic assembly where every species had equal voice and equal vote. Humans took their place as founding members of the new order. Commander Harris remained on the bridge of the Defiance until his retirement. He had spent his life serving a species that the galaxy had dismissed as worthless. Now he served a species that commanded respect wherever it went. "Do you ever think about the old days?" Chen asked him once. "The jokes and the insults and the humiliation?" Harris looked out at the stars that humans now traveled freely. Ships bearing the flag of Earth passed through systems that had once been forbidden to them. Human colonies spread across worlds that the Velrani had claimed were too good for primitives. "I think about it sometimes," Harris admitted, "but not with anger anymore. We took everything they threw at us and turned it into fuel. Every insult made us more determined. Every rejection made us work harder. In a strange way, they created the force that saved them." Chen smiled. "Maybe we should thank them." Harris laughed. It was a genuine laugh, free of the bitterness that had marked his earlier years. "Maybe we should, but I think they have learned their lesson. No species will ever make the mistake of underestimating humans again." The galaxy entered a new era of peace and cooperation. Old enemies became allies. Former victims became protectors. And at the center of it, all stood humanity, the species that had once been the joke of the galaxy. They had waited 300 years for their moment. They had prepared in secret while the galaxy laughed. They had struck when the time was right and changed the course of history. Now they stood among the stars as equals, as leaders, as the species that had proven the most dangerous lesson of all. Never laugh at someone who is quietly preparing for the day when the laughter stops. Because when that day comes, the ones who were laughing will have nothing left but regret, and the ones who were preparing will have everything. Captain Ben Taylor received orders to take the USS Valor deep into Krath territory. His mission was to gather intelligence on enemy strength and identify high-value targets for future attacks. "We are going into the heart of darkness," Taylor told his crew. "No support, no backup, just us against whatever we find out there." Lieutenant Commander Nicole Ross studied the mission parameters. "The engine modifications will let us run silent for extended periods. They will not know we are there until we want them to know." Taylor smiled grimly. "That is the plan. We hit them where they least expect it. We show them that nowhere is safe. We make them afraid to sleep." The war was entering a new phase. Humanity was no longer reacting to threats. They were creating threats. They were taking the fight to an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the Krath were learning a lesson that the Velrani had just begun to understand. Humans were not primitives. Humans were not a joke. Humans were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced, and they were just getting warmed up. Main Fleet was still gathering strength somewhere beyond the galactic rim. This victory was important, but the war was far from over. But for the first time in 300 years, humans had a seat at the table. They had proven themselves in battle. They had shown the galaxy that the joke was finally over. And they were just getting started. Sullivan sat alone in her quarters after the battle. She pulled up a recording of the old Velrani comedy show. The host was making jokes about human pilots and their clumsy ships. She watched for a moment, then deleted the file. She did not need to remember the insults anymore. The future mattered now, not the past, and the future belonged to humanity. "All ships are to proceed to Velrani space immediately. We are authorized to engage the Krath Dominion with full force. This is not a drill. This is not a test. This is the moment we have been waiting for." Lieutenant Commander Nicole Ross checked the power readings on her console. The engines hummed with barely contained energy. The weapons systems glowed with readiness. "How do you feel?" Taylor asked her. Ross thought about all the years of preparation, all the secrets they had kept, all the insults they had endured while pretending to be harmless. "I feel ready," she said. The fleet launched from hidden shipyards across the solar system. 200 warships emerged from the darkness of space and formed into battle groups. They were smaller than Velrani vessels. They were uglier than Krath cruisers, but they were built by humans, and humans had 300 years of anger to unleash. Harris read the message twice, then he deleted it. He looked out at the stars and thought about everything his species had endured. the jokes, the insults, the denial of basic dignity. The Velrani had no idea what was coming. They had spent 300 years laughing at humans. They had never stopped to wonder what humans were doing while they laughed. They were about to find out. Harris turned to Lieutenant Chen. "Send a message to all department heads. Full readiness inspection tomorrow at 0600. Chen nodded. She did not ask why. She already knew. The time for being a joke was almost over. The time for revenge was about to begin.